Rebecca could not call the audio will a fake because every word belonged to her father. Then an acoustic analyst found a faint electrical hum underneath his voice and matched it to the power grid 6 weeks before the supposed deathbed recording. Rebecca Hale was 41, an archival editor who had built her career preserving the context around other people's words, which made it unbearable that she could not disprove a recording of her own father's. 3 days after Martin Hale's funeral, his widow set a small recorder on the library table and played his voice. Martin sounded tired but clear. He said Rebecca had abandoned the publishing house when it needed her, revoked her authority over the Hale Literary Archive, and handed Celeste full control to sell or keep it. Celeste was 58, a literary agent who had managed Martin's contracts and his medical care through his final 2 years. The message ended with a date, March 14th, and the words, "This is what I want before there is no time left." Every word was genuinely his. That was the problem. Martin died the next morning. Rebecca recognized every cadence. He mentioned the blue ladder she fell from at age 9 and the unpublished letters they cataloged together. No synthetic voice would know which details mattered. Celeste produced 2 witnesses from the hospice. One heard Martin identify himself through the door. Another signed a memo stating he appeared competent. His written trust still divided control between Rebecca and Celeste, but a discretionary clause allowed a recorded direction to govern the archive if capacity was confirmed. The archive included manuscripts, correspondence, and rights worth several $1,000,000. Celeste had already scheduled a meeting with a private buyer. Rebecca listened again. Behind her father's words was a low, steady hum, almost hidden by the recorder's noise. Rebecca copied the file without opening it in editing software and asked Celeste for the original recorder. Celeste said the hospice misplaced it after a nurse transferred the message. The file's creation date showed March 14th, but its metadata also showed an export through a consumer audio program. Celeste called that normal conversion. Rebecca knew metadata could be changed and refused to treat it as proof. What troubled her was the sound. The hum remained beneath breaths and chair creaks, yet it shifted abruptly between sentences that were supposed to follow one another. She made 3 preservation copies and documented their checksums before contacting anyone else. Her training made the procedure automatic, but it also reminded her how easily expertise could look self-serving in an inheritance fight. Rebecca did not announce that she had found a fabrication. She wrote down each audible discontinuity and asked an examiner to begin without her theory. If the pauses came from normal hospice editing, she needed to know that before accusing the woman who had performed the care Rebecca avoided. Scene: father and daughter arguing among boxes of literary papers. Rebecca and Martin had argued during his final year. She wanted the archive placed with a university under restrictions. Celeste favored a private sale that would pay medical debts and preserve the company. Rebecca left the publishing house after Martin licensed an unfinished novel against an author's family's wishes. She stopped speaking to him for 5 weeks. The estrangement ended before hospice, but their repair remained incomplete. Martin apologized for using the archive as leverage. Rebecca apologized for disappearing when Celeste carried his daily care. That history made the recording painful and plausible. Martin could have changed his mind again after Rebecca left the hospice on March 14th. Celeste said he requested privacy and recorded the statement at 10:43 p.m. using her handheld device. A hospice nurse heard his name and date from the corridor. Rebecca's attorney warned that attacking the voice without proof would look like refusing her father's final judgment. She asked for the original recorder. Celeste supplied it, but the audio file had been exported through editing software to remove long silences and coughing. Celeste called those edits compassionate. The words remained Martin's. The question was whether they had ever existed in that order, room or night. Their dispute gave the recording credibility. Rebecca had moved across the country and declined daily management of the publishing house. Celeste had handled medication, contracts, and visitors while Martin's health failed. He had accused Rebecca of leaving before. He had also accused Celeste of turning every conversation into a negotiation. The audio preserved only the first grievance. Rebecca could not clear herself by insisting her father would never say those things. He had said them. Someone had removed the answers that kept one true complaint from becoming his entire decision. Scene. Audio waveform with dozens of small cuts marked in red. Acoustic analyst Dr. Jonah Reed found 26 edits. Some removed breathing. Others joined phrases across changes in background noise. Celeste admitted she shortened the recording but insisted she never changed meaning. She supplied a transcript Martin supposedly reviewed. Voice comparison confirmed the speech came from Martin. There was no detectable synthetic generation. Rebecca recognized several phrases from a family history interview she conducted with him months earlier. When Martin said she left when the house needed her, he had originally described his own sister leaving the family farm. Rebecca searched her interview files. The relevant recording was missing from her cloud folder after Celeste collected Martin's laptop. Celeste said similar phrasing proved only that Martin repeated himself. The analyst could show edits, not original context. A legal recording could be shortened. Private details and authentic voice continued to favor Celeste. Then Jonah isolated the background hum. It hovered near 60 Hz but wandered by tiny amounts over time. Electrical grids do not hold frequency perfectly. Supply and demand create a changing pattern that can enter audio through lamps, chargers, or transformers. If reference data existed, the hum could operate like a clock. Acoustic examiner Jonah Price warned that electrical network frequency analysis was not an exact clock by itself. Recorders might filter mains noise, reference archives could contain gaps, and similar short patterns could appear more than once. A reliable opinion required a long clean segment, a known regional grid, and independent support. He found 26 edits in the statement but no synthetic speech. Most segments carried enough low-level hum for comparison. The result could narrow dates and expose discontinuities. Could not replace the missing source recording. Jonah ran blind comparisons against several candidate days supplied without labels. February 1st produced the strongest continuous fit, while two shorter stretches produced ambiguous similarities elsewhere. He reported all three rather than hiding the alternatives. The February pattern extended long enough to cross several natural pauses and was supported by the apartment's region. That made it useful, not infallible. Rebecca appreciated the caution because Celeste's recording relied on the opposite method. Remove every uncertainty until a complicated conversation sounded like one unbroken command. Scene. Acoustic frequency trace compared with utility grid records. The hospice occupied the eastern grid region. Its utility retained frequency monitoring data for reliability analysis. Jonah compared the recording's electrical network frequency pattern with March 14th. It did not match any interval that night. Celeste said the recorder ran on batteries and the hum might come from its electronics. Internal device noise would remain stable or drift with temperature. This signal rose and fell in the same irregular way as a live power network. Jonah expanded the search. 6 weeks earlier, on February 1st at 7:12 p.m., "Hi, I'm Ethan Cole, and this is Ethan After Dark, where I tell stories of betrayal, family secrets, revenge, and sweet justice. Now back to the story." The hum matched a neighboring western grid for 23 continuous minutes. Martin had not entered hospice then. He was staying at Celeste's city apartment while his house underwent medical modifications. The date did not automatically prove location. Millions of buildings shared that grid pattern. Rebecca found her calendar. She had interviewed Martin at Celeste's apartment on February 1st for the family archive. The session began at 7. The supposed final statement was assembled from that interview. Celeste argued Rebecca's calendar was self-serving. They needed the original source audio. Jonah compared the longest segments against archived frequency data from both regions. The hospice grid did not fit the main body. A western grid produced a strong candidate on February 1st, but he reported it as a supported match rather than an unquestionable timestamp. Rebecca's calendar showed a family history interview at Celeste's apartment that evening. Building access records placed all three there, and a neighbor remembered a brief outage during dinner. Those details made February plausible. Without the original interview, Celeste could still argue coincidence. Scene: a miniature recorder recovered behind books on an apartment shelf. Rebecca remembered using a backup recorder because her main device battery was low. After the interview, Martin placed it on a shelf behind a row of dictionaries. Under a preservation order, investigators searched Celeste's apartment. The recorder remained there with its memory card. It contained the unedited February interview. Martin discussed his sister, the family farm, the blue ladder, and his regret that Rebecca left the company. He also said he wanted Rebecca and Celeste to share archive control because each distrusted the other's priorities. The phrases in the audio will appear throughout the interview. Celeste cut pronouns, removed questions, and joined answers separated by minutes. The low hum matched exactly because a floor lamp's transformer entered both recordings. A distinctive elevator chime sounded faintly near the end of the source and beneath one edit in the final file. Celeste said Martin later used the old interview as a script and re-recorded his wishes. But the waveform around several phrases contained identical breaths and chair creaks. They were not repeated performances. They were the same samples. The voice was authentic. The statement was not. Rebecca returned to the apartment with a court-appointed inventory officer. Celeste had already delivered Martin's papers to the buyer's warehouse for inspection, but a cabinet of obsolete recorders remained behind the books. One device contained a damaged memory card. Its directory appeared empty. A specialist recovered file fragments rather than a complete playable recording. Several phrases matched the supposed deathbed statement, but gaps prevented showing their original order. The recovery established a source existed on February 1st. It still allowed Celeste to say Martin repeated the same words in hospice. Scene: hospice corridor outside a closed patient room. The hospice aide who heard Martin identify himself had stood outside a closed door. Celeste told her Martin was recording legal wishes and asked her to confirm he sounded alert. The aide heard, "My name is Martin Hale," followed by the date. She did not hear the archive instructions. Jonah examined that segment. Unlike the rest, it carried hospice ventilation noise and no electrical hum. Martin had genuinely stated his name and date on March 14th. Celeste placed that short clip at the beginning of the February material. The capacity witness entered later and saw Martin sign a note confirming he made a recording. The note did not describe its content. Celeste said it concerned the archive. Martin may have believed he recorded a personal message or medical instruction. Sedation logs showed he received pain medication 30 minutes earlier but remained capable of simple decisions. The witnesses had not lied. Each confirmed a narrow fact Celeste arranged around a larger false document. Rebecca understood why the recording felt so official. It borrowed authenticity from people who never heard the whole thing. Hospice aide Marisol heard Martin identify himself and state the date through a closed door. She then walked away to answer a call. A second witness saw him sign a one-page memo acknowledging that a recording had been made. Neither heard him distribute the archive. Celeste joined the authentic introduction to the older interview and used the memo as if it approved the finished message. The witnesses had told the truth about narrow moments. The false conclusion appeared only when their separate truths were presented as one continuous event. Scene: transcript pages with signature pressure visible on only the last sheet. Celeste's transcript carried Martin's initials on the last page. The earlier pages contained no marks. The hospice nurse remembered Celeste presenting a single-page confirmation, not a 4-page transcript. Staple holes on the sign sheet did not align with the packet now attached. An indentation beneath Martin's initials revealed words from the original page: personal history recording completed. The phrase archive direction appeared only on the replacement cover. Rebecca did not rely on this paper evidence as the central proof. The altered packet showed Celeste manufactured written support. The ENF match and source recorder established what the audio actually was. Celeste shifted again. She said Martin privately authorized her to edit the history interview into a final directive because speaking exhausted him. Nothing in the source interview granted that authority. At one point, Martin said the opposite. "Do not let either of you sell without the other." That sentence was absent from the final audio. The recovered transcript contained Martin's corrections in Rebecca's handwriting and Celeste's notes beside several answers. At one point, Martin said Rebecca left because he made work with him impossible. Later, he said Celeste had earned security but should never control sales alone. Celeste marked both passages with the word emotional. The final audio kept his accusation against Rebecca, removed his admission of responsibility, and moved praise for Celeste beside a command about control. No word was invented. Meaning changed because the spaces between words disappeared. Scene: private archive purchase agreement beside medical debt statements. The private buyer's offer expired the Monday after Martin's funeral. It included a confidential payment to Celeste for consulting and access. The publishing company carried debt, but the archive sale exceeded what was needed. The buyer planned to separate manuscripts and letters across collectors, ending the possibility of a public research collection. Celeste believed Rebecca's university plan undervalued the archive and left her without financial security after years of caregiving. Martin's trust gave Celeste income, but not the control she believed that care earned. She also feared Rebecca would portray the final marriage as manipulation once Martin could no longer defend her. The audio did more than authorize a sale. It made Martin accuse Rebecca first. Celeste used real grievances because fabricated words would sound artificial. She assembled a version of Martin that contained every wound and none of his balancing instructions. The buyer paused closing after receiving Jonah's report. Celeste needed the audio upheld at an emergency trust hearing. The proposed buyer was not merely acquiring books. The contract included film rights, unpublished correspondence, and authority to keep private letters sealed for 50 years. Celeste received a guaranteed consulting position if the transaction closed before the estate's annual reporting date. Rebecca had opposed the sale but also feared a public dispute would expose family letters Martin intended to protect. Each woman could plausibly be accused of using his privacy for leverage. That ambiguity made the technical sequence more important than either woman's account of his wishes. The written trust required shared approval precisely because Martin distrusted certainty from either side. Rebecca had once treated that arrangement as an insult to her archival training. Celeste treated it as an insult to years of care. The buyer promised to remove conflict by placing one professional company in control. That promise made the sale attractive while turning Martin's private doubts into assets the company could withhold. The edited audio did not create the temptation. It supplied the permission no living participant could honestly give alone. Scene: audio cuts aligned with a continuous grid frequency graph. Jonah mapped each spoken segment against the February source. Every piece carried the same Western grid frequency sequence found at its original position. When Celeste moved a sentence from minute 18 to minute 4, the hum jumped backward in the grid pattern. The final audio's electrical time did not move continuously. It leaped through February in the order required to create a new meaning. The hospice identification clip carried a different Eastern grid pattern from March 14th. This clean boundary marked the first splice. This analysis answered Celeste's claim that Martin re-recorded the same language. A new performance would carry the grid pattern present during the new recording. Identical speech noise and identical historical frequency deviations could come only from the old samples. The edits were no longer signs of possible shortening. They formed a map of extraction. Rebecca listened to the unedited interview. Her father sounded contradictory, stubborn, affectionate, and afraid. The false audio sounded certain because Celeste removed every sentence that complicated it. Jonah mapped the hum beneath each segment. The authentic hospice introduction carried the Eastern grid and ventilation fan visible in maintenance records. The remaining phrases carried the Western Grid candidate from February 1st and jumped backward and forward through that evening. One sentence contained a chair scrape that continued beneath another answer in the recovered fragments. The overlap was stronger than the grid match alone. Person could repeat words. The same unfinished scrape could not naturally occur under two different sentences 6 weeks apart. Scene: widow and stepdaughter facing each other in a publishing office. Celeste offered Rebecca shared proceeds if she honored the sale. She admitted editing but said Martin's overall wishes favored financial stability. She listed the nights Rebecca was absent, the medical forms she completed, and the fear of losing her home after Martin's death. Rebecca did not dispute the labor. She offered Celeste lifetime housing and the income promised by the written trust. She would not allow the archive direction to stand or keep the fabrication private. Celeste said no court could measure what caregiving cost. Then you should not have made his voice pretend it could, Rebecca replied. The conflict between them was real. Martin had left it unresolved because resolution required negotiation after him. Celeste converted that burden into a recording where he chose one woman and condemned the other. Rebecca refused to let an elegant lie become the final version of a complicated person. Celeste admitted making cuts but called them clarification. Martin tired easily, contradicted himself, and never produced the concise direction the trust required. She believed caregiving gave her the right to remove hesitation and preserve what he meant. Rebecca recognized part of that resentment. She had left Celeste with work she could not bear to do. At the same time, care did not turn interpretation into authorship. Celeste had converted dependence into authority and then used Martin's real voice to hide that conversion. Scene: trust hearing with audio frequency traces projected on a screen. At the hearing, Celeste played Martin's voice and presented the hospice witnesses. Jonah first confirmed that the voice was genuine. Then he displayed the electrical frequency beneath it. The main speech matched the Western Grid on February 1st. Rebecca's backup recorder contained the complete interview from that location and time. Phrase by phrase, waveform details, and chair noises aligned. The March identification clip matched the hospice grid and stopped before any archive instruction. Witnesses confirmed only that short statement and a general capacity note. The final file jumped backward and forward through February's grid sequence at every meaning-changing cut. The judge rejected the audio direction, blocked the sale, and enforced the written trust. Celeste lost archive authority and faced claims for fabricated evidence. The witnesses were cleared of knowingly supporting the false content. Rebecca had spent weeks afraid that her father's true final act was rejection. The proof did not show he never felt anger. It showed someone else arranged the order in which his anger would survive him. At the hearing, Jonah stated every limitation before his conclusion. The grid comparison supported a February source but was not offered as a standalone date. The recovered card, shared breaths, continuous chair noise, building access, and edit map established that source independently. Marisol and the second witness limited their testimony to the introduction and memo. The judge rejected the edited direction, suspended the private sale, and returned control to the written trust. Celeste retained the housing and income the trust already promised. She lost the authority created by the recording. Scene: University Archive listening station playing an unedited family interview. The Hale archive entered a university partnership without being sold. Celeste received the housing and income guaranteed by the trust under independent administration. Rebecca did not require poverty as punishment for deception. The institution preserved both the edited file and the complete February interview with restricted legal notes. Future researchers could hear how authentic material became false testimony when context disappeared. Rebecca listened once more before the collection opened. Martin complained about her absence, praised Celeste's care, doubted the university, then returned to his insistence that neither woman control the archive alone. He contradicted himself because people do. Beneath his voice, the apartment lamp created a faint hum whose frequency followed the strain of a city grid on an ordinary February evening. Celeste had treated that noise as emptiness between words. It became the part of the recording that could not be persuaded to remember March. The university archive preserved the edited file beside the recovered interview, transcript, examiner's limitations, and written trust. Rebecca did not label one true and the other false without explanation. The edited file contained true sentences arranged into a false command. Visitors could hear Martin praise, blame, retreat, and revise himself across the full evening. Celeste's care remained in the record as well, including appointments and correspondence Rebecca had not handled. The faint grid hum mattered because it anchored those human contradictions to the ordinary room where they occurred, before grief turned selection into certainty. Rebecca recorded an introduction that stated what the analysis could and could not establish. She named the recovered source fragments, continuous noises, witnesses, and trust language before mentioning the grid comparison. The order prevented a fascinating technique from becoming a magic answer. Martin's meaning survived because several modest records agreed. No single hum spoke for him. The complete evening did, including the sentences that disappointed both women and the pauses Celeste once treated as empty space available for removal. Celeste later contributed corrections to the care chronology through her attorney. Rebecca accepted factual changes without granting her editorial control over Martin's words. Their communication remained limited. Shared stewardship did not require a sentimental reconciliation. It required both women to leave enough context that the next disagreement could not be solved by cutting the other person out. And that's the end of this one. If it kept you up, do me one favor, hit subscribe. I tell a new story every single night, and I'd love to have you back. Good night.